this?
Let's do this.
All right, here we go. First one. This is going to be at the end, actually. This will totally be. So, all right, well, welcome everybody to the BimmerLife Podcast, the inaugural episode. My name is James, and here with me is Adam, president of the Golden Gate chapter. So, welcome, Adam.
Thank you, James.
Thank you for
having me.
All right. So today we're going to talk about something that I think is going to be relatively fun. We're talking new versus old. So there's a lot of folks, myself included, who prefer more of the older BMW that potentially leaves a few droppings in the driveway every once in a while. And then Adam here likes some of the newer stuff. So Adam, why don't you kind of tell us some of your history with BMWs, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. So thank you again, James, for having me. I joined the BMW car community back in 2013, which is actually, for me, 10 years is a long time, roughly 10 years is a long time, but not in our community, because that's a drop in the bucket as far as time is concerned. But my first BMW was a 2013 F30 328i.
Okay.
And I got that car after having a Mini Cooper prior. And so really, technically, the Mini was my first BMW.
Okay.
It was a 2011 Mini Cooper S.
Okay.
And I just fell in love with it. The handling of the Mini Cooper was great. The look of it was adorable. I named him Mitchell Clarence because I thought that went along with his little, a little white roof.
Oh,
and
yeah. Did you have the Union Jack on the top?
I didn't have the Union Jack on the top,
okay.
but I did put white racing stripes to match.
Okay.
And he was just a sharp little guy.
Yeah. And
then my mom got an E90 328i. Okay. And I have to credit my mom with a lot of my, really, the last 10 years of my life, because when I remember I drove her car to the store one day, and I said, "Oh my gosh, this is like my Mini Cooper, but all grown up."
Yeah.
And it was kind of like this moment where I was like, okay, well, the Mini is cool, but there's this whole other world of BMW that I have to explore. And so as soon as my circumstances allowed, I'm sure it was the next promotion or whatever, you knew where I was.
Oh, yeah.
East Bay BMW. And that's where the F30 happened.
Nice. So have you pretty much always purchased new ones? Have you ever gone the used BMW route, or is it pretty much dealership, kind of pick the options you want, go from there, or?
So funny you should ask, James, because my current car is the 2020 BMW M340i. And it is the first used BMW that I've ever bought. So when I say used, it's a certified pre-owned.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah.
We'll get into that later. But the car had 37,000 miles when I picked it up in March of this year.
Okay.
Now it has 55,000 miles.
Oh, wow.
And so it's November.
Yeah.
So
You drive a bit.
I drive a bit.
All right, fair enough.
And that also, I think, is part of my story and why having a reliable car, regardless of the age, is of importance to me.
Nice. So it's very interesting because, the new stuff is obviously, it's cutting edge, it's the latest and the greatest. There's been some stylistic changes to BMWs, of course, that have kept things fairly interesting. And, I started out with E30s predominantly, so 84 to 91 3 Series, technically 93 if it was a convertible. And, it was 4 glass headlights, a simple little kidney grill. You can kind of see a little bit of it here on the E30 M3. And it was very much, it was the BMW look of the time.
Yeah.
And I remember when the E36 came out, the headlights were behind glass, and I thought, is this really the way we're kind of going with this? Is it kind of, does it really make sense to me? Does it not? But it was kind of the progression of BMWs. The bumpers weren't chrome anymore; they were plastic, and it was kind of where all auto manufacturers were going. But the one thing I always enjoyed about it was the overall handling characteristics have subsequently gotten better pretty much every single year. And, for me, it was very interesting because up until I bought my 2010 M5, the newest BMW I'd ever had at the time, at least legally registered that I didn't buy for parts, was a 1992 525i station wagon full of mold with a tan interior, and I think I paid $600 for it. And so I'm a little bit overpaid. The funny thing is nowadays it's probably a $3,000 car, unfortunately. The roof was stuck open, it misfired. In fact, the funny thing about that particular car was the transmission actually failed on me crossing the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in the Seattle area, or Tacoma area, and I coasted it to the other side, and none of the gears worked except reverse. So I drove it backwards for 2.5 miles to my shop. Mind you, I was going the correct direction of traffic, but I was going backwards. So I was staring at people ahead of me as I was driving backwards. So I'm looking like this, waving.
Freaking out.
There were some opinions, yeah. I mean, if it was like a Buick Roadmaster, the seats would just be facing back and it just would have worked perfectly fine. But the older ones were always kind of fun for me. So the start was E30s, and then we kind of went from there. So let's talk a little bit about BMW styling, right? It's a there's a lot of turmoil, opinions, all sorts of things about this. You have potentially a brand new BMW on order. In fact, I know you have a brand new BMW order. What do you have coming?
So I'm very, very fortunate to be able to have gotten a allocation for a 2024 M3 CS.
Okay.
So this will be the first time where I've ordered, I guess you could call it a limited production or special edition M3. And so it was kind of a box that I wanted to check for myself. And I wanted to have that experience in this generation after being one of the first to own a 2021 M3 competition. So that was the first model year of the current generation M3. While the rest of the world was in upheaval about, the car world was in upheaval about the kidney grills. Yeah, exactly. And I remember thinking, I was like, gosh, because at the time that was the first M3 that I had ordered custom from Germany, where I was able to say, this is what I want, these are all the things. And I said, gosh, I've finally made it to the point in life where I could order a new M3, and this is the generation where BMW just completely dropped the ball. Just if you were to pay attention to the enthusiast communities and internet circles and basically the comment section on anything on the internet related to these cars.
Yep.
And I said, oh, that's kind of a bummer. But then I got the car, and yeah, it was the styling change was dramatic.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first saw pictures of the G80, I said to myself, it can't. Oh wow. I said, what has BMW done?
Yeah.
This can't be real. This can't be right. But then I drove the car, and kind of like you were saying, every generation improves, generally speaking. And I mean, this generation of car has gone down already. Will go down in history as one of the best driving M3s of all of them. Yeah.
And they're getting lighter now too.
And they're getting, they are getting lighter in the sense that you have to pay for the lightness now. But I work with people. I work in human resources, and car enthusiasts are an interesting bunch, because complaining about any new change goes back to the E30, even beyond.
Oh yeah.
Just like you were describing with the E36. There is a human component of this.
Oh, for sure.
A psychological component. Oh wait, this is new. It's too heavy. It doesn't have power, or doesn't have hydraulic steering. Excuse me. It's all-wheel drive. People will make up their minds to hate it.
Well, I remember talking to a 2002 owner, older guy who had one for a long time, and he remembered the uproar of when they went from the round tails to the square tails.
Oh yeah.
And that's just a little taillight change. And
change
it was always
hard.
an opinion.
Change is hard.
Well, people hate change.
Period. They
change,
don't like change, but the show must go on. And, as I was telling you and some other friends the other day, if BMW continues to do what I think they've always done with the M3 in particular, which is to make the next one better, period.
Yep.
There will be things that are special and unique to the last generation always, as technology changes. the manual transmission will be, eventually will go away. And that will be a special thing if you have a manual M3.
Yep.
But the feeling of flying down the racetrack, with a 600 horsepower, engine, it cannot be felt in an E30.
From the factory.
From the factory.
Especially, the E30 M3 was, I know that was what, 200 and 220, 230, something like that. I'm sure someone will tell me in the comments. I already know what the actual power is, depending on what it is. But it's very cool to see. And what's interesting to me is I remember, so the newest BMW that I have is a 2010 E60 M5. It's a 3-pedal car, so I'm a little bit different on the direction of the transmission. Everyone was pushing for SMG at the time before we had the dual clutch, and it was very interesting because North America, all the E39 M5 owners, when the E60 came out and it was only a flappy paddle 7-speed gearbox, it was as if someone just drove a bulldozer through their life. Everything was uprooted. They hated it. And I remember driving one of these cars, and I said, it's lovely, but on the street, it's clunky, it's quirky, it's not that enjoyable. And ironically, it was North America that pushed having a 6-speed car. And for me, that was just a huge change in kind of BMW's role on, saying, okay, you know what? It may not be the fastest, but we'll still make it.
Right.
The G80 M3 is, you can't buy a competition in a stick.
You can still buy a base
But you can
car.
still get a stick. You can still get an M2 in a stick.
And I think that's a really interesting point, too, about BMW, because I think BMW, even today, listens to its customers. And people are buying this.
Yeah.
They're buying the G80 and the G82.
Yep.
And I think one of the cool things for me to see, being an early adopter for this generation, is showing up at a car meet. And you have folks that have been driving BMW since the E30 that show up in a new G80.
Yep.
Right along a new demographic that has never owned a BMW before.
And they like them, and they love the look of them.
And so you think about, sometimes I feel like if BMW were to listen too much to its customers, it would probably go out of business. But they do listen enough, in the sense that,
Bring the wagon back.
They will
Bring the wagon back. But they are going to bring the wagon back. The M5 Touring.
Bring it here.
It is coming to the U.S.
And
the new one.
They're doing that, so they are doing that with the new M5. That'll be exciting.
Not the M3, unfortunately.
Not the M3.
That would have been fantastic. That would have been so cool to have.
And it was kind of fascinating to learn about how this generation of 3 Series just was not. They did not design it to be exported, at least in wagon form. So, it just didn't make business sense. But I'm glad that they are listening with the new M5.
And there's a lot of cool enthusiasts out there that, or I should say enthusiasts that are also pushing other companies. Well, Porsche does the same thing. You can still buy a 911 with a manual, which, a 7-speed manual. They've been putting a lot of effort in that. So it's cool to see enthusiast offerings still out there. I remember when the E60 M5, or the E60 in general came out, I still to this day refer to the E39 as being one of the most gorgeous 5 Series ever made.
I would agree.
Although the F90 M5 is quite the looker as well, I have to say.
I know.
It's
That F90 just
gorgeous car.
Gets me every time I see one.
It's a lovely car.
Want it.
And I remember seeing an E60, I think it was a 525i, and I thought, this is the ugliest car I have ever seen in my life. It was, the trunk looked weird, it had the eyelashes on the front.
Bangle era?
Yeah, this was a Chris Bangle car. This was a Chris Bangle car. And I own an E60 M5.
Yeah.
So it's kind of this thing where it is progression. And now I think that every time I get into an E39, I still love them. I love my E39s. But I get into the E60 and it still feels modern to me. The E39, and I haven't done CarPlay or any of the fancy aftermarket stuff, and we'll get to technology here in a second.
There's a generational gap.
But there's a big generational gap. On my E60, I have heads-up display, I have DVD capabilities, I have navigation that's actually pretty good. Mind you, I have the later 2010, so it's the start of kind of I think it was 2010 to about 2018, and it kind of looked like that CIC and then CIC Evo and NBT, which was next or new big thing or next big thing is what BMW called it. But it was really, really cool to see the technology constantly progressed. I love the fact that still in 2023, I can plug my iPhone into the car
And
I've used a cable.
Yeah, it still works.
And it still works. I have album art. Everything pulls up. I can shuffle. I can browse playlists.
Yeah.
And the last time that car got a software update was probably 2012, maybe 2013. So it's really, really cool to see 10 years after the latest update for a car that's 13, well, technically 14 years old because it was built in 09, still getting those updates.
And I do think Chris Bangle was a visionary. I do think his designs have aged well. No, people did not like them at the time, but I think history is on his side. And I tend to think that too with the newer designs.
Yeah.
Just because of who's buying them.
Yeah.
And it's great to see new blood, so to speak, in the BMW community, new energy, new younger demographic too. And it kind of dawned on me at a point, I was like, now I get why BMW did this. Aside from the fact that it is extremely aggressive, and I've never had driven any BMW where as soon as you get up on someone, generally speaking, they move out of your way in a way that they did not in my F80.
I think that's more of a California thing. They don't really do that in Washington. Yeah. They love that left lane. They will just stay there for hours.
You see those grills coming, and it's it's a sight.
Yeah, it's definitely cool to see. Let's talk technology for a minute. So I'm in the tech industry, and for me, if I can have Bluetooth to the car, I'm happy. And that's kind of where I've always ended. I've never really been big on CarPlay, or in fact, I don't have a single car that even has CarPlay. But I know it's a really big deal to a lot of people these days. And now they have the full dashboards that are wide LCD screens. And they kind of started, I believe, with the i4 is where they kind of started it. And then now it's pretty much commonplace on the newer M3s, M240s, M2s, et cetera. Technology, to me, is the big change that happens every year with the car. I would argue that an F80 M3 compared to a G80 M3, there is a substantial improvement, but it's not, I think, as substantial as the tech that's put into the cars. So is that kind of a determining factor? What kind of pushed you to going G80 versus hanging on to some of the older stuff? Or what was kind of the general thought there? Do you have to hook your phone up to the car? Is that really a necessity in your daily life? Or?
For me, as a millennial who grew up loving technology, yes, it is.
Okay.
At least in my daily driver. Do I need to have that in? If I had a multiple car garage, would I need that in every car? Absolutely not. But generally speaking, if Adam Mahoney is going out to buy a new car, yeah, absolutely, it needs the latest technology. Whether Apple CarPlay, you mentioned, makes integrating your phone with the car so much easier than it's ever been before.
Especially
and more
with wireless now.
And BMW was one of the first to do that.
Yeah.
No plug.
No plug needed.
Yeah,
and I don't believe, do they still charge for it as an add-on? Okay, so now it's just built into the car.
It's just built into the car.
Which is good. A lot of manufacturers, I think, kind of ran into a challenge where they spent so much time trying to compete in that market. I know Toyota did. Every Toyota you would buy, they'd try to force their software on you. It's just give us Android Auto or CarPlay. Just make it easier.
But I'm going to use the word technology and its importance to me as a consumer broadly, because yes, you have your Apple CarPlay. We were joking earlier about the heated steering wheel, which is not new, but now it's it's an option on pretty much every BMW.
Had it on the E39.
Right. Yeah. So I would also say the car itself, the chassis, the braking system, the cooling system. These are, in the last two generations of BMW, and in particular in the current generation, are light years above or beyond what BMW has put in the cars historically. The G80 M3, first M3, at least that I've known in my lifetime, to come from the factory with good brakes, that you can go to Laguna Seca, have a good track day, and not have to worry about them giving out.
The monoblock calipers have been a huge upgrade compared to predecessors, for sure.
Absolutely. The same with the suspension system. I remember when listening to T.C. Klein talk about the current generation of cars, and he said, this is one of the first generations of cars where I don't feel like I have to go out and design a suspension system for, because the one from the factory is so lacking in some way, shape, or form.
Rip it apart when it has 4 miles on it.
And of course, yes, the technology in the car too. I decided to become an early adopter for the new M3 when I had, so in February of 2020, I had the idea that, because I had a 2018 F80 M3, and that was my track car, my everything car. I said, I'm putting too many miles on this thing. It's a lease. I want something else. The G20 had been out for about a year, and I was like, maybe I could get, back in the day, a lease deal on,
like a 330 or
or
something
330,
like that.
or and so I went down to Weatherford BMW in Berkeley, and there was a black Sapphire 330i. The money all worked, and so I got that for my commuter car, and
to keep miles off the M3
in February of 2020, and so I made it to the office one day before COVID happened.
Yep. So you put all of 12 miles.
I put all of 12 miles on it, but then I was just like, just driving across the Bay Bridge and the bad over potholes in San Francisco, and I was like, this thing rides really well. Yeah. And so, of course, as soon as I could, I was out there on the back roads with my little 330i, and I was like, this thing drives better than my F80 did.
There's something to be said about a non-M car too, really. I have a 540 wagon, E39, and the way it handles, the way it drives compared to my 01 M5 is substantial. Has air suspension in the rear, softer springs, softer shocks.
It's not as intense.
It's not as intense, and you can just cruise in it all the way up to 60, maybe 70, maybe a little bit higher, depending on where you're based in the United States. But it's just a wonderful place to be.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about a non-M car. It never feels as stressed. It never feels just as involved. I will say the E60 is a little bit of a change for that to me. That's one of the most comfortable M5s I think they've ever made.
But with the G20, James, you could be intense, and it would handle it.
Yep.
It wasn't sloppy. It wasn't, it didn't lose its composure in a corner. And I said, this new M3 is going to, what I didn't know anything about it, but I said, that's what I want for, the replacement for my F80, which by comparison, I love the F80. I think it's one of the most beautiful generations of.
I like it better than the M2. I think it's a gorgeous
car. And
the big hips on the back.
The hips, and it has the classic sedan proportions,
Yep.
up until this, what we had considered to be, it's like a classic look. There's a gorgeous car, but even in competition form, where they started to sort out the suspension and crash over things, just overly abusive suspension by modern standards. Yeah. And this was just like a revelation, night and day difference.
Was yours the adjustable dampening car, or was it the stock sports suspension?
So I had two F80s actually. The first one, both had adaptive suspensions, but the first car was a base car. So I think they did some things to the dampening and all that, like the dampers and everything, on the competition to make it a little bit more well behaved on the road. But it's nothing compared to the new ones.
It's interesting to see older BMWs. I was reading an article the other day, and I forget exactly where I was reading it, but it had to do with suspension design. And one reference that apparently is still made today is that a lot of car manufacturers, when they're trying to determine that perfect kind of balance for a normal road car, they base it on the E39 geometry.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a very fascinating thing. And if you look underneath a lot of cars, which technically the E34 is similar, with the exception of the rear trailing arms, but you look underneath a lot of modern cars and it looks very similar, distant cousin to any production E39. So BMW, realistically, since 95, 96, has just been perfecting it more and more and more. Yeah. From the E30, the E36 was a huge leap forward in suspension geometry.
Yeah.
And then went to more modern cars, E46s, et cetera. But the E39 5 Series has always kind of been that testament. And you pick up a brand new car, F80. I've not been underneath the G80 yet. There's a lot of similarities there. So it's cool to see they've just been slowly perfecting it.
And I think there's a reason that the E39 is considered the benchmark for a high performance sedan.
Except for the brakes. The brakes are terrible.
But that's the thing. And you get in an F90
and they're
the F90 is a solid platform just in general, but the competition, I think, while it comparative to an E90, you're going to lose some feel. It's going to have great brakes. It's going to have a more sorted suspension, and of course, it's going to have that engine. Yeah. now you move on up to the CS. Remember we were talking about you've got to pay for.
Oh yeah.
You've got to pay.
And the
for
M5 CS is,
and so it's. I think there's a lot of folks in the enthusiast community that will, they have a hard time admitting anything is better than an E39 M5. But there have been some journalists that have said, no, this is better than the E39 M5.
And I have no issues pointing flaws out in the E39 M5. I hate the stock brakes. They're just not as solid compared to my E60 brakes. And a lot of folks are putting either Brembo or StopTech monoblocks on them, or retrofitting, brakes from other generations. A couple weeks ago, drove an F90 M5 competition at the Performance Center down at Thermal, and that was one of the first times I'd driven an M5 really in a track environment with carbon ceramics. And because normally I'm driving cars that are steelies, and other than the fact that the disc rotor or the brake rotors are probably $4,000 to $5,000 a piece, it is shocking how well you stop that thing. And then you just laugh because you're putting, race car tech, Formula One tech in theory,
in a street car.
In a street car. Yeah. And they weren't that loud on normal street driving. They got up to temperature relatively quickly.
One of these days I will have a car with ceramic brakes, but I hear so many horror stories. And this is the thing. It's I feel like it's the folks that they're driving on their favorite back road, and maybe they get a rock in the the caliper that messes up the rotor, and then they have this crazy expensive repair. I feel like their voices, because understandably that's an awful experience after having spent that much money on a car, are maybe disproportionately loud to the folks that have them and never have that experience and really love having that kind of stopping power. Oh, by the way, without creating brake dust. That's honestly the appeal to me.
That is the killer. No, it is. It honestly is cheating. And what's funny about it is so I'm not the best person when it comes to detailing my cars. I maintain them. I don't detail them. I'm awful at it. I'm terrible at it.
I clean my cars, but I'm not, I'm not that guy. Yeah.
And it's funny because for some reason, all of the front wheels on most of my cars have a gunmetal dusty finish. And I don't know why. I think it has to do with Tectar or Pagid or whoever I'm buying brake pads from. But no, that is something about carbon ceramics is they don't dust nearly as bad.
Like a 10 grand worth? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Or maybe I'll pick them off a wrecked one at some point. That'd be pretty cool. So when it comes to speccing and ordering, right? This is old versus new, right? So we're kind of talking about the new tech, a lot of the new tech, a lot of the old stuff. When you go to source a new car, you're either seeing potentially what they have on the lot, which sometimes they have enthusiast options. Usually, at least my local dealers, a lot of X3s, some 5 Series, some 3 Series, a lot of i4s and i5s now, which we'll talk in a later episode about electrification. So in my case, when I'm looking for something, it's what color can I find on Craigslist? And we were having a fun little conversation earlier about, the color of your new M3 CS, which is
Signal Green,
which is a gorgeous color, very unique color. And I remember the first time I ever saw it, which I believe was on a GT3 RS Porsche, I think
probably right.
is what they based it on. Unbelievably cool color.
Yeah.
Most of mine are a faded version of titanium silver, which is usually the option I go for. But I kind of wanted to showcase this a little bit. I want you to kind of explain to me a little bit about buying a new car and kind of choosing the options. I'm going to flip over to another screen real quick and kind of showcase this because I think this is pretty cool. This is from 1991, and this is literally, if you walked into a BMW dealership back in the day, this is what you would choose and this is what you would use. And everything down to the Evolution, world-class automobiles, and it's a quirky little program that they had, I remember this, in these dealerships. And discover BMW and their high-performance luxury cars and all these other things. But it's just really, really cool that, this was the tech back in the day, when they had the 8 Series before it kind of, went away for a while. But, let's look at the 3 Series since, we've been talking about that for a long time. This is when the E36 first came out.
Wow, look at that.
And it's just wow. You look at the bumpers, and the funny thing, this was actually a base model spec. So realistically, it's just really, really cool to see where a lot of these folks have gone. But what's interesting here is being 91, this was when they were in that transition year. And so if you notice, 325i 4-door new, if we go to M3, this is where it gets kind of fun. General specifications, we can look at, what the car had. It's an old DOS
Wow, look at
program,
that.
as you
That
can
is
see
incredible.
here.
It's like something out of a museum.
Yeah, and it's just really, really cool to see how they did it back in the day. Yeah, 7.6 seconds 0 to 60. It's a little quicker now.
Wow, look at that.
Just a little bit different. Top speed of 143 miles an hour. I would argue you're probably a little bit quicker in that regard to be able to hit that. But one of my favorite things, and if this makes you cry, I apologize, but let's look at how much an M3 cost in 1991.
right?
$35,600.
Isn't that something?
But look at the 4 options. We have metallic paint, heated front seats, an alarm, and a CD changer.
Not much, huh?
That is it. So seeing this, when you ordered your M3 CS, how many options? I mean, there had to be a substantial amount of options.
So
for these
somewhat
cars.
ironically, with the CS, because it's a special
There's probably not
production
as many
car,
then.
there's actually only 4 or 5 options,
Yeah.
including the color. But if you were to order a regular G80 M3, like my first one in my 2021, there were so many options that it was almost daunting, and you really kind of had to study all of them to make sure that you were making the right decision.
Was a lot of tech packages? Was it a lot of just trim stuff?
driving
All
packages,
sorts. Yeah.
all of
That's
the,
your driver assistance and
yes.
all the display systems, the safety systems. Yeah.
And then, for example, I remember agonizing over, do I want the driver's professional package? Because then you get that dome, that kind of like radar dome that's right there at the lower part of the grille. And I was like, oh, that just throws off the look of the front a bit too much. So
especially on the M2.
And on the M2,
it's
right there in the middle.
There. Yeah.
And so, but that's even before you get into the carbon packages, and you want, chrome badges or black badges, or there's all sorts of options. But I think a lot of that goes back to what we were saying earlier about BMW listening to customers. And also, I think realizing too that it makes good business to allow customers to option a lot of the accessories, if you will, or things that used to be accessories maybe 20 years ago, where you get your new BMW and then you go straight to Dyna.
Yeah.
Now you don't have to do that, especially with this current generation and all of the technology that they've put into making the car a better driving car. And a lot of that, that's why the option list is so long.
Do you think we're at a point now where, so let's talk about Dynan, and, back in the day, during the E30, E36, there was Hartga, there was AC Schnitzer, there was Dynan, there was all these third-party companies and tuners, very similar to AMG to Mercedes, as Dynan was to BMW. And I remember a conversation with Steve Dynan back in the day, and one of his things was we had to do these things to the cars because they just weren't as solid as they could be. We had to fit bigger brakes. We had to fix better cooling. Early M5s were notorious for overheating in LA traffic. They just weren't built for that. The fans were too small, the engines were too big. Do you think we're kind of at the point where the aftermarket for the regular enthusiast, and I say regular like the guy that just, buys the CS, buys the competition, maybe puts some stickier tires on it, but the tires it comes with are also pretty darn good. And just quote unquote kind of sends it versus taking it and throwing all the fancy. I mean, I don't think the tuning market's going away at all, but
no, I think turbos just made the tuning market.
You just
different.
Turn the knob to 11 at this point.
I mean, technology has changed the entire game, but I like to think that the advances in technology that make the current M3 one of the best driving M3s from the factory is a good thing, ultimately, because it allows people to spend more time behind the wheel.
Yeah.
And you don't have to, fret and spend thousands of dollars and hours of time going to all of these shops and tuners.
But that's kind of fun, though.
It's still there. It's just become more maybe extracurricular and not necessarily essential.
Yeah. I also think the reliability has gone up as of late.
Oh yeah, I mean, my friends and I who we like to track our cars have a saying called F80 weather. And we like to track an F80 weather, and that's hot weather, because we've had experiences where I've been out there in my F80s and 110 degree track days. Everything else is either overheating or having problems on track, and
Oh yeah.
the M3, you look at the
Temp gauge, yep.
and it's actually
Yeah.
getting cooler.
More fans,
I
better
mean, it's just
cooling,
incredible
etc.
what
Yeah.
they've done. Like, and so for me, as someone who loves to drive, who loves to, use my car to its extent and explore all of its capabilities, I love being able to do that. Yeah, they're expensive, but what you get out of the box, so to speak, it's incredible.
Because you're not really much of a wrencher, in
No,
in
that
your
is
case,
true.
you just want to
That is
enjoy the
true.
cars, etc. And
I'm not a tinkerer.
Yeah, tinkerer. There we go. And that's certainly one of the challenges, right? Is I remember we were having a great conversation over dinner last night,
Yeah.
and one of the funny things was we both, I think, came to the realization that between the hoopties, the Craigslist specials, the whatever. In fact, I have an M70 E32 I'm in the process of putting back together. I think in the end, we probably spend about the same.
I think so.
Whether it's in
Yeah.
sweat equity, pain, suffering, or in my case, doctors or chiropractic visits to keep myself functioning
Yeah,
after trying to put the car together.
I mean, I know from my perspective, the most expensive things aside, I mean, you have to count in, the payment of the car, regardless of what that is, and it's no matter what money, whether you're buying it or leasing it, money's money, and they're
Yep.
expensive. But also, I think consumables too, especially when you get above the 3,500 pound
Oh, for sure.
weight.
Heavy cars,
range,
ball
heavy
joints,
cars,
bushings, everything.
So you're going through tires and brakes.
Mm-hmm.
Though I will say that with this generation of M3, once again, like, not only are the brakes incredibly durable, but the tires now, BMW's been doing this for a while, but from a performance standpoint, the Michelin 4S tires, the Pirelli tires that come on these
Mm-hmm.
cars new are not the same as if you were to go to a Costco or
Oh, for sure.
whatever your favorite tire shop is. Like, BMW has designed them specifically for this model,
That's why you put Pilot Sports on those.
but
They're
make
great
sure it's
tires.
a BMW Star, because it's an entirely different tire. The 4S, for example, is an entirely different tire than the 4S Star, which shares compound from the Cup 2.
Yep.
And is engineered to be able to, withstand the heat, the weight that comes with, tracking a 3,800 pound car.
Yeah. Very cool. No, I love the enthusiasm too, because I'm used to keeping the leaking ones on the road, the ones that are exploding and falling apart, etc. But it's also cool to see where BMW is going.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of controversy over appearances and looks these days, but also we've been saying the same thing since the 2002 era, since the 3.0. I mean, everyone that changes is a little bit different.
And I never will forget having a conversation with someone who's been in the club for a long time, and Donna Seeley.
Mm-hmm.
And she loves the E30, and I remember talking to her about how things were, when she was tracking her cars, and she said, I just really never I never fell in love with the E30. It's too big. And I was just kind of like, whoa, okay, well, what? Hold up a second here, and so. That kind of gave me a different perspective on, I think folks fall in love with BMW at different stages in life, different platforms, different generations of M3.
Yeah.
But I like to think that, if you look back over the last 30 years of M3, every generation's been special. It's been the right M3 for that time. And that makes all of them unique.
Yeah.
I try not to stop paying attention, because I think progress is really exciting, and every generation brings something new. And I remember when I worked at Apple retail back in the day, and this was before Apple was big. So it was, we were all Apple evangelists. If
Gotcha.
you're a Mac fan, it was like
Yep.
your mission in life was to basically convert everyone who didn't own a Mac.
Push these things.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is funny, because I wasn't a Mac person. This whole thing is being recorded on Macs. It's hilarious.
And so I remember when Apple decided to switch PowerPC from PowerPC chips, which had long been in their computers,
I remember that, to Intel.
to Intel. And the upheaval in the Mac community, the Mac enthusiast community at that decision was...
I remember watching that.
And everyone was just freaking out about, wow, what is Apple doing? It's not going to be the same. It's going to be the death of the Mac. I mean, the purists. And it resembled the internet comments when this thing was
on the Tombstone grills.
Yeah, and it was like, what is BMW? BMW's lost the plot. They've lost all these things. And so I've always said to myself, I was like, I'm going to try to not be a PowerPC person. When it comes to these things, I mean, technology. So we are so fortunate to live in this era where, we have all these advances and things are getting better and better, objectively so. So I don't want to lose sight of that, and I don't want to sell myself short because I'm averse to change.
Yeah. No, that's a good call. And realistically, I remember that entire era, which is funny because now we're back on to technically PowerPC.
Apple had the last laugh there.
Yeah, Apple's doing their own silicon. Well, this has been a lovely conversation. Really, really enjoying it. I think for some closing remarks, why don't you tell everybody about the Golden Gate chapter? We had a great drive yesterday. I was not the oldest car. There's an E46 M3 there, so I wasn't the oldest guy there.
Well, I mean, and that's new.
And that was new, right?
New.
Normally, I was surrounded by M3s and brand new M4s and everything. But it was a wonderful drive. You guys have a great thing going on around here. So why don't you talk a little bit about the Golden Gate chapter?
So I became president of the Golden Gate chapter at the start of this year, somewhat unexpectedly, but I have really enjoyed the last year getting to learn more about all the different programs that the chapter offers. I have been fortunate to be able to participate in just about everything that we do so far, from Cars and Coffee to track days, to autocross, car control. So we're kind of winding down the year at this point. But some of the things I'm looking forward to in the new year is, keep your fingers crossed, if everything goes according to plan, this will be the first year where the chapter has done an overnight driving tour. So I'm going to go on record and saying this right now. Because I didn't mention it earlier, but one of our most popular programs is the driving tours. And, we have so many great roads around the Bay Area, but the Golden Gate chapter is actually covers a lot of California, all the way down to San Luis Obispo. So I think that means the road is calling in 2024. And so I'm excited to, we'll have all of our, we have a great team and they've organized some of the best events. All of the events that we've long had will continue, but with a twist and some new adventure, which I'm really looking forward to.
That sounds really, really cool.
Yeah.
And if the drive yesterday was any showcase to it, I think it'll be a blast.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah, it was a few too many cars, but it was all right.
And that's the thing.
Yeah. Not BMWs though. It was everything else that was in our.
It was everything, and cyclists too. And that's one of the things I always tell people is, and I think it goes back to my childhood and getting in that Dodge Grand Caravan with my dad and going exploring when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. I'm the happiest. I love people. Like I said, I work in HR.
Yep.
But I'm also the happiest when I'm as far away from them as possible.
Yep.
And so you give me a back road where you don't have a whole bunch of cyclists or a lot of traffic.
Yep.
It's not about, even with a car like this, it's not about proving anything or making a record, but it's freedom.
Yeah.
And it's
there's no Formula One scout hanging out in the trees looking for you.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very liberating feeling that is almost addictive. I think I'm glad that I prefer my vehicles with four wheels. I think if I were to ever get into motorcycle riding, I think I would probably.
I'd be dead.
I would. Yeah, exactly.
I'm
like, I don't need that. But I do think that is probably the only way that you could get more of a natural high from driving on great roads.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, Adam, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it for the inaugural episode, the first one we've ever done. And we look forward to more of these in the future.
Thank you for having me, James.
Awesome, cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, appreciate it.